faithfully sharing insights and interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally here with the Book Talk. Today I'll be interpreting the book, The Tea Thief: How Tea Changed World History. The author is Sarah Rose, a renowned American writer and journalist, also a columnist for the Wall Street Journal, who graduated from Harvard and the University of Chicago. The Tea Thief is Sarah Rose's debut work in literary and historical writing. Thanks to the book's huge success, she received funding and awards from the New York Foundation for the Arts, launching her career as a professional writer. We'll hear better. The original English title translates directly to Chinese Tea: How Britain Stole the World's Most Popular Drink and Changed History. Though a bit long, it accurately captures the book's core theme. After the First Opium War, Britain sent commercial spies to steal China's tea production secrets, reshaping global tea history. The so-called tea thief refers to the spy who stole tea seeds and know-how for Britain. To tell the tea thief's tale, the book spans East and West, involving institutions like the East India Company, horticultural societies, and foreign firms, with diverse characters taking the stage. The story shifts scenes between Britain, India, and China. The multitude of people and events weave a complex web, making for a fascinating story that starts with how Westerners discovered Chinese tea. Before Britain invaded the East, Portugal was the first Western European nation to trade directly with East Asian countries. Portugal had been entrenched in Macau since the late Ming Dynasty and never left. From Ming Dynasty Chinese, the Portuguese learned to drink tea and grasped its value. So in the 1660s, when Catherine of Braganza from Portugal married England's King Charles II, she brought tea as part of her dowry. From then on, tea drinking became a trendy social ritual in the British royal family, embraced by high society and quickly spreading to all classes. Of course, tea's importance went beyond an elite ritual. Even in the 20th century, London wasn't a clean city, lacking proper sewage systems. London streets overflowed with sewage, drowning in garbage and disease. But tea must be brewed with boiling water to drink, which genuinely saved the health of many ordinary British people. Moreover, tea is rich in theanine and caffeine, offering benefits like mental alertness and fatigue relief. Not to mention the British custom of adding milk and sugar transformed tea into an excellent food source. All these factors made tea Britain's favorite beverage, surpassing even beer and coffee. Custom statistics reflected this. Half of Britain's imports from China were tea. According to contemporary Treasury estimates, the annual tea trade with China was worth billions of pounds, equivalent to hundreds of billions today, with profits accounting for 10% of Britain's economy. Tea import tariffs, plus domestic consumption taxes, made up a staggering 10% of the British government's total annual revenue. The British reasoned, if tea trade is this profitable, wouldn't growing our own yield even greater riches? If Britain grew its own tea, it could stop spending hard currency on Chinese imports, dominate the global market, and gain limitless wealth. But who could undertake this mission? The government deemed the East India Company ideal. Having monopolized China trade for centuries, tea profits constituted half their earnings. They were the obvious choice. As early as 1815, native tea was discovered in Assam, northeastern India. The East India Company then invested millions to establish 500-acre plantations for experimental tea cultivation. They anticipated that if successful, each kilogram of Indian tea could fetch £6 in London, about $2,000 today. But Indian Assam tea was widely considered vastly inferior to Chinese tea in flavor. The market simply didn't accept it. After years of failed experiments, the company abandoned developing indigenous tea and turned to technology theft, smuggling Chinese tea seeds from Guangzhou to trial in Indian colonies. This time, the results were far better than the previous Chinese tea grown in Assam plantations and shipped to London. Tea tasters confirmed its delightful aroma, vastly superior to earlier Indian black tea. But flavor-wise, it still couldn't match premium tea imported directly from China. Turned out, China's finest tea came from Huangshan in Anhui and Weiyi Mountain in Fujian, while Guangzhou was distant from these regions, and Chinese tea compradors lacked production knowledge. So from Guangzhou's compounders, the British couldn't get premium tea seeds or plants, nor learn specific production techniques. Thus, in early 1848, the East India Company devised an espionage plan. Find a suitable tea thief to infiltrate China, steal top tea seeds, and learn advanced tea-making methods. So who was this tea thief? He was an obscure Scottish botanist named Robert Fortune. From Scotland's lower class, with no formal training, he became an expert through decades of hands-on work in botanical gardens. Back in 1842, right after the Opium War, the East India Company sent Fortune to infiltrate China, seeking exotic plants. Fortune delivered, spending 3 perilous years in China, narrowly escaping death repeatedly. Per his memoir, his most dangerous episode was catching malaria aboard a coffin boat from inland China to Guangzhou, nearly dying. Huddled on his makeshift coffin plank boat, Fortune prayed sailors wouldn't toss him into the river. Then, as misfortunes piled up, pirates attacked their boat at the Pearl River estuary. The desperate Chinese sailors had given up hope. Yet Fortune struggled up and scared off a whole boat of pirates with his pistol. We can't verify if this happened or was a fever-induced hallucination. But that didn't stop Fortune from publishing these experiences for profit. This became 3 Years' Wanderings in the Northern Provinces of China, published soon after his 1847 return. This book documented Fortune's various observations and encounters with all sorts of people during his undercover stay in China. It opened a window for the English-speaking world to understand mysterious China, gaining some fame at the time. Of course, Fortune's real job was botany. During his over 3 years undercover in China, Fortune collected over 15,000 Chinese plant specimens, including rare ones like winter jasmine, bleeding heart, white wisteria, Chinese wisteria, gardenia, double yellow tea, rose chrysanthemum, Chinese fan palm, and more. Among them, the Chinese fan palm was even presented as a birthday tribute to Queen Victoria. This man was practically born to be the tea thief. In 1848, in May, the East India Company formally signed an employment contract with Fortune, covering all his expenses for entering and leaving China. During his mission in China, all other plants Fortune collected belonged to him, with an annual salary of £500. His sole task was to gather China's best tea and tea-making techniques. For this, he had to do everything possible to access China's best tea-producing regions. Disguising himself and using cunning words to gain locals' trust, he brought back thousands of tea seedlings, tens of thousands of tea seeds, and highly specialized Chinese tea cultivation and processing techniques. Only by successfully obtaining all these could the East India Company's tea plantation project launch smoothly. In September 1848, Robert Fortune sailed to the Shanghai International Settlement. British firms in Shanghai mobilized resources to support his mission. Chinese compradors used local social connections to get Fortune a fake identity as a high-ranking ethnic minority official. As cover, they provided Fortune with Qing dynasty official robes, a realistic fake queue, shaved his head to change appearance, and even hired a genuine Qing martial arts scholar as his personal guard. This martial arts scholar had previously guarded high-ranking court officials and received an official banner from the government. With this banner, Fortune's spy team could practically travel unimpeded across half of China. Fortune's spy team's first destination was Hangzhou, Zhejiang. It turns out, as early as 1842, during his first undercover mission in China, he learned that the origin of China's finest green tea was Hangzhou, Zhejiang, and Huangshan, Anhui. The origin of premium black tea is Fujian's Weiyi Mountain. Considering season and transportation, Fortune planned his espionage in 2 phases. In phase 1, he'd first enter the tea regions of Zhejiang and Anhui provinces. These areas had better transport and more open locals, making it easier to obtain China's finest green tea. Then, in next year's phase 2, he'd trek hundreds of miles into Fujian's Wuyi Mountains, uncharted by Westerners, to hunt the world's best black tea. In October 1848, Fortune in Qing official robes finally reached a green tea factory outside Hangzhou. Posing as an inspector, here Fortune observed and recorded how world-famous Chinese tea was made, revealing its processing steps to the West. Per Fortune's notes, the steps were picking, sun wilting, pan firing, rolling, and finally grating. Sun wilting means placing fresh leaves in large bamboo trays under direct sunlight for 1 to 2 hours. Sunlight acts like boiling water. Wilting tea under it resembles cooking leaves, hence called tea boiling. Next is pan firing, stir-frying the withered leaves in a wok. In huge pans, workers fiercely stir crisp leaves, rupturing cell walls to release juices that moisten the tea. Then comes rolling, dumping the pan-fired leaves onto tables. Workers surround the tables, rolling bamboo tubes over leaves to press essential oils to the surface. After pan firing, the moistened leaves get dried this way. Now the tea weighs just a quarter of its freshly picked volume. After rolling, they repeat pan firing and rolling until finished, then grade the tea by quality at long tables. According to Fortune's records, the production process for black tea is quite similar to green tea, with the only difference being an extra step called fermentation for black tea. When making green tea, you just need to expose fresh tea leaves to the sun for 1 or 2 hours. But for black tea, it has to be sun-dried for 12 hours to wilt, curl up, and release juices. Then stir the juice evenly and save the mixture for the next processing steps. Even though this step is called fermentation, chemically speaking, it doesn't involve any yeast or microorganisms. So more accurately, black tea is oxidized or ripened. Fortune, another unexpected discovery. Chinese factories habitually add gypsum powder and Prussian blue when making green tea. These two chemical substances, Prussian blue is a toxic cyanide, and gypsum powder is also a widely used poison. Long-term use can cause memory loss, headaches, irritability, dizziness, and even miscarriage in pregnant women, preventing infants and children from thriving. Fortune estimated that for every 50 kilograms of tea produced, Chinese factories mix in over 200 grams of gypsum powder and Prussian blue. And this is done just to make the tea look prettier and smell better. We don't know, is what Fortune said true, or a lie made up by the British to hurt their business rivals. But the claims about gypsum powder and Prussian blue are only seen in Fortune's records. Regardless, after Fortune finished his spy mission and returned to Europe, he exposed the scandal of toxic dyes in Chinese green tea at the 1851 London World Exhibition, using it to justify Britain growing its own tea and decisively changing British tea preferences. From then on, Britons only drank black tea. After leaving Hangzhou, Fortune infiltrated the main origin of premium green tea in China in November 1848. And at Hongshan in Anhui, he stole 13,000 tea seedlings and 10,000 tea seeds over 2 months. All tea seedlings were placed in Wardian cases, and all seeds were mixed with preservatives, then sealed in bags. Personally escorted by Fortune to Shanghai, then shipped via sea and land to British India. So let me briefly explain what a Wardian case is. It's a glass device invented by Nathaniel Ward, a British botanist in the 19th century. Ward discovered that by placing plants in a sealed, transparent glass case with regular sunlight, they could survive indefinitely without water, even in harsh external conditions. The principle is that under sunlight, plants in the sealed glass case use moisture in the soil and mix with carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, releasing oxygen at night. The evaporated water vapor condenses on the glass lid at night due to cool air, forming droplets that drip back into the soil, creating a near endless cycle that allows plants to thrive long-term in the sealed container. The invention of the Wardian case technically solved the problem of long-distance plant transplantation. Without the Wardian case, even if Fortune successfully stole Chinese tea seeds or plants, transporting them healthily across the ocean to India would have been impossible. Now, with the Wardian case, the plan to steal Chinese tea had solid technical support. After completing the first phase of espionage, Fortune took a short break, celebrated the new year, and immediately dove into the second phase. This time, the target was black tea from the Weiyi Mountains in Fujian, 1849. In May, Fortune left Ningbo, Zhejiang, and arrived at Weiyi Mountain in Fujian 2 months later, right at the peak of the tea-picking season. From April to October each year, tea-picking women in the Weiyi Mountains harvest every tea plant every 10 days, plucking only the topmost leaves. Because only the two tenderest, most aromatic leaves at the tip of each branch are suitable for tea making. A skilled tea picker can only gather about 4.5 kilograms of fresh leaves per day. Once these fresh leaves are harvested, they're processed into finished tea following the steps described earlier. Fortune also recorded the so-called proper way to drink tea, broken into 4 steps: boiling water, preparing the cup, adding dry tea leaves, and drinking. Fortune particularly emphasized the importance of boiling water. The water must not just be hot, it has to be boiled, but not boiled for too long. If overboiled water is used to brew tea, it tastes as bland as plain water. Moreover, during tea production, storage, and transportation, it inevitably mixes with impurities, dust, and uninvited guests like insects that might crawl into the tea piles. Therefore, the first cup of tea must be discarded. Of course, documenting Chinese tea ceremonies was just a side gig for Fortune. His main target in the Weiyi Mountains was the king of teas, Da Hongpao. The earliest original Da Hongpao sacred trees in the Weiyi Mountains produce about 450 grams of new buds each season, and the tea made from these buds often sets record high prices in the market.
30 original sacred Da Hongpao trees can sell for thousands of dollars, truly more precious than gold.
Luckily, Da Hongpao tea trees propagate asexually. Just cut a branch, bend it into the soil, and with some cultivation, it grows into a new tree. Plus, the new trees inherit an exact genetic copy from the mother plant, and through asexual propagation, Da Hongpao gradually spread across the Weiyi Mountains over time. So, Fortune stole hundreds of Da Hongpao saplings from Weiyi Mountain, collected thousands of branches, and bent them into the soil in Wardian cases for asexual propagation. This is how Fortune was, diligently and tirelessly working for the British Empire, seemingly never questioning the impropriety of such brazen spying. It wasn't until Fortune finished his mission and was about to leave Weiyi Mountain that his conviction began to waver. There's a local temple in Weiyi Mountain dedicated to guarding the sacred Da Hongpao trees. The abbot of this temple, thinking Fortune was a court official, gifted him several precious tea plants and camellias before he left. Before this, the Western world knew nothing about these new tea and camellia varieties, and another temple's venerable monk, hearing of Fortune's round-the-clock hard work, thought he was a loyal, patriotic official. Upon hearing Fortune was leaving, he came to see him off, and, upon meeting, prostrated himself in worship. At that moment, Fortune felt guilt for the first and only time. Later, Fortune recalled in his diary that he was so ashamed he almost lost his balance and fell. But overall, Fortune's espionage in the Weiyi Mountains was an unprecedented success. He completely stole the secrets of Chinese tea, which had monopolized the world market for 200 years. In the autumn of 1849, Fortune finally completed the second phase of his espionage mission and returned to Shanghai. The entire spy team escorted Fortune's treasures. The Wardian cases returned fully loaded.
However, just back in Shanghai and full of ambition, Fortune was crushed by a letter from the East India Company.
Letter informed him that his first phase of work had been completely wasted, and
The shipment of Huangshan green tea seeds to the Indian colony had turned into a complete disaster, washing away a whole year's hard work. Back in December 1848, Fortune had packed these green tea seeds in Wardian cases and sealed bags, personally escorting them to Shanghai.
but it wasn't until January of the following year that the saplings and seeds set sail from Hong Kong to Calcutta, India. By the time this precious cargo reached Calcutta, it was already March 23rd. However, Calcutta wasn't the final destination. The plantation was in the remote northwest frontier bordering Afghanistan, the Hindu Kush Mountains in 1849. On April 12th, these Wardian cases full of seeds arrived at an inland city, still half the journey away from the final destination. But there, a senior local official opened the sealed cases out of ignorance, pretending to inspect plant survival. He reported the plants intact to superiors, but this act had broken the Wardian case's seal. As a result, when the cases finally reached the destination, the situation was devastating.
Only 1,000 out of 13,000 saplings were still alive.
After belated rescue efforts, just 80 remained healthy. The tea seeds fared even worse.
The experiment ended in utter failure. Not a single seed sprouted.
Reading the letter, Fortune felt dizzy and his lips turned pale. One could imagine no blow more crushing than this. But at this critical moment, Fortune demonstrated the resilience of an expert botanist and history's most successful commercial spy. He quickly rallied and found a way to turn defeat into victory. Fortune hired Shanghai's finest glass craftsmen to create massive Wardian cases measuring 1.2 meters wide and 1.8 meters high. In innovative, resourceful tone, he cultivated all seedlings and seeds from his second espionage phase in these giant Wardian cases, inventing a new method for growing plants inside them. Previously, Wardian cases were only used to store mature plants to ensure their survival during transport. But Fortune modified the cases into miniature ecosystems for plant development, planting seeds in the soil layer at the bottom. Through photosynthesis within the sealed environment, the seeds grew into mature plants. When these giant cases arrived by sea at Calcutta, seeds planted in Shanghai had already sprouted after 2 months' voyage.
Fortune's experiment succeeded, met with thunderous cheers from everyone.
These precious black tea varieties had gained self-sustaining growth capacity, resilient against external destruction. Through Shanghai compradors, Fortune hired experienced Chinese tea technicians who disguised themselves as contract workers, bypassing Qing customs to sail with the stolen Wee Dahong Pao saplings to Calcutta. Ultimately, thousands of Dahong Pao seedlings in 1.2 meters by 1.8 meters glass cases, along with skilled Chinese technicians, were transported to the southern foothills of the Himalayas. At Darjeeling tea plantations in Assam, northeast India, they hybridized with local varieties and, through generations of cultivation, became world-renowned Darjeeling tea. Darjeeling tea boasts a unique flavor profile, floral aroma with rich, sweet notes.
Over the next half-century, it would dethrone Chinese tea's 200-year global dominance to become the new world tea champion.
Here concludes The Tea Thief, How Chinese Tea Changed World History. Looking back post-Opium War, Britain's East India Company sent Scottish botanist Robert Fortune to secretly infiltrate China and steal its tea secrets to dominate the global market. And, aided by foreign firm compradors, Fortune, disguised as a Qing official, traveled through the Yangtze Basin and Wuli Mountains, stealing precious tea seeds and seedlings. He brought China's tea processing techniques to colonial India, while the company hired Chinese tea masters. In the tea plantations of Assam, India, they finished breeding and making new tea varieties, creating the world-famous Darjeeling tea. From then on, in the global tea market, British tea decisively beat Chinese tea. This book is mostly based on the reports, letters, and memoirs of the tea thief Fortune himself. However, the secretive nature of espionage makes it hard to verify the documents Fortune left behind. The verification of these historical materials, even though author Sarah Rose consulted tons of original sources, it still seems tough to make up for this gap. But the history that unfolded later. History shows that Fortune's tea theft was a huge success. The Dahung Pao tea seeds Fortune stole from the Wuyi Mountains really created the later world-famous Darjeeling tea. This can be traced back through modern botany with no doubt, and Darjeeling tea lived up to British hopes. Yeah, it defeated Chinese tea in the international market, helping Britain flip its trade deficit with China and pulling off an amazing feat. All right, that wraps up our take on The Tea Thief, How Chinese Tea Changed World History. Heard the notes are below the audio. Catch you next time.